It started with a rumor, not a confession, not a dramatic coming out. Just a whisper passed along locker rows and cafeteria tables, traded like gossip candy in the bored mouths of teenagers desperate for something to talk about. They say he's gay. I don't even know who started it. One day, I was just another kid blending into the backdrop of high school noise. The next, I was something else. Something people stared at when they thought I wasn't looking. Something that made the guys I used to sit with at lunch find a new table. Something that made girls either giggle nervously around me or look at me with an odd kind of pity, like I'd been diagnosed with something. No one asked me if it was true. No one had to, because once a rumor sinks its teeth into you, the truth doesn't matter. It becomes a stain that spreads through every interaction. The way people spoke to me, the way they avoided standing too close, the way even teachers began to look at me like I was fragile or problematic, or maybe just a distraction. Everyone kept their distance. Except him, Jake. It still catches in my throat when I say his name. Not because it hurts, but because of what it meant. What he meant. Jake wasn't one of my close friends. We'd had a few classes together over the years. I think the first was freshman year biology, and then again in junior year lit. I knew his laugh before I really knew him. It had this sharp, almost cocky edge to it, like he always knew something other people didn't. He was the kind of guy everyone liked without really trying. Athletic but not a jock. Funny but not a clown. The kind of boy you notice without him needing to be loud. And after the rumor started to spread, when people began to act like I'd grown some invisible barrier around me that they couldn't cross, Jake did the opposite. The first time it happened, I was sitting alone during lunch, pretending not to care. I told myself I liked the solitude, that it gave me time to read or scroll my phone, but I was lying. Felt like being slowly erased. Like I died socially and everyone just moved on. I was halfway through a sandwich I didn't want when I felt the bench creak beside me. I didn't look up right away. I figured maybe someone sat down by mistake, or maybe it was a new kid who hadn't gotten the memo yet. The silent notice that sitting with me came at a cost. But then I heard his voice. Hope you're not saving this seat for someone. I looked up. Jake was already unwrapping whatever meal he'd gotten from the cafeteria. Chicken tenders, I think. He met my eyes briefly and gave a half smile, like he did this every day, like we were friends. I blinked. No. It's yours. He nodded and dipped a tender into ketchup like it was the most normal thing in the world.
No tensión.
No forced conversation. Just presence. And that was how it started. He didn't make a speech. He didn't tell me he was some brave ally, or that he didn't care what people said about me. He just showed up, over and over again. He'd sit with me at lunch. He'd partner with me during group assignments. He'd call my name when I walked into class and gesture to the seat next to him like it was mine. And slowly, cautiously, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I felt. I remember one day in gym class, someone muttered a slur under their breath when I walked by. I don't even think they meant for me to hear it. But Jake did. He didn't say anything in that moment. Just clenched his jaw and shot the guy a look that made him shut up fast. But later, as we were walking off the field, Jake bumped his shoulder against mine. They don't know shit, he said. I didn't respond right away. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. But I remember nodding, and how even that small gesture felt like a relief. I asked him once, maybe a few weeks later, when the rumor had settled into reality and I was finally starting to breathe again, why he started sitting with me that day. Jake shrugged like it was no big deal. You looked like you needed a friend, he said. And I figured, why not me? I smiled, trying to play it cool, even though my chest felt like it might split open from how much that meant to me. Well, thanks, I said. It helped. He looked at me for a long moment before replying. Good. You helped me too, you know? I didn't know what he meant at the time, but I never forgot the way he said it, like it held more weight than he was ready to unpack. And slowly, something between us began to shift. Something I wasn't sure I was imagining. The way his hand lingered just a second too long when he passed me something. The way his eyes would flick to my lips when I spoke. The way he smiled when we said goodbye, soft like he didn't really want to leave. I started dreaming about him. Not in a wild fantasy kind of way. More like, Us walking down the street and brushing shoulders. Him sitting close enough on my bed that our knees touched. His hand on the back of my neck when he laughed. The kind of dreams that hurt when you woke up because they felt so real. But I didn't say anything. Couldn't. I didn't want to ruin what we had, whatever it was. Until one day, I didn't have to say anything at all. Because Jake did. And that's when everything changed. It happened after school on a Thursday. The sky was overcast, the kind of dull gray that makes everything feel heavier, like the clouds are pressing down on the town. We'd been paired together for a history project and decided to work at my place. My parents were still at work, and I knew we'd actually get things done there. Or at least, that's what I told myself. He came over with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a hoodie that looked too soft not to notice. He smelled like citrus shampoo and mint gum. I remember that detail because I couldn't stop thinking about it. How even the scent of him made my heart ache. We worked for maybe 30 minutes. Actual work, flipping through notes and Googling sources until we just stopped. Fell into that comfortable silence you only really get with someone who sees you, even if they can't say it out loud yet. Jake lay back on the floor beside me, stretching his arms behind his head. "This project's boring as hell," he muttered, eyes tracing invisible shapes on my ceiling. I sat cross-legged next to him, laptop still glowing in my lap. "Yeah, well, welcome to junior year American history." He smirked. "You ever think about running away?" That caught me off guard. "What, like, from this town?" He nodded. "From everything. Just disappearing. Starting over somewhere no one knows you." I closed my laptop. "I used to," I said quietly, "especially after everything happened. People treated me like I was radioactive." Jake turned his head to look at me, and there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Sadness, maybe, or regret. "I hated watching that," he said. "The way they looked at you. The way they stopped sitting with you. You didn't." "Yeah, I didn't." Silence fell again, but it was different this time. He sat up slowly, facing me now, legs crossed like mine. "You know," he said, voice quieter, "I thought a lot about what it would be like if it were me." "What do you mean?" He swallowed. "If people thought I was like you." I tensed, not because I was afraid, but because I could feel it. Something was about to crack open. I searched his face. "And," Jake let out a breath, "I think I'd be scared. But maybe not if I had someone like you around." That's when I realized he was shaking a little. Not dramatically, just this subtle tension running through his hands and shoulders. Like he was holding something back and didn't know how to keep it hidden anymore. I reached out, carefully, and touched his hand. He didn't flinch. Instead, he turned his palm upward and laced his fingers through mine. It was so simple, so quiet, and yet it felt like the loudest thing in the world. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," he said, barely above a whisper. "But I didn't know how to say it. Not until you." I didn't ask what this meant. I didn't need to. His hand was warm, his fingers tentative but firm around mine, and the look in his eyes told me everything else. "You don't have to say anything," I said. "Not if you're not ready." He gave a short, soft laugh. "I think I just did." Then, without letting go of my hand, he leaned forward, hesitantly, like he was giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't, and when our lips finally touched, it wasn't fireworks or a movie moment. It was gentler than that, slower, like we were both holding something fragile between us, afraid it might break. When we pulled apart, Jake rested his forehead against mine. "I'm still figuring things out," he said. "I know, but I don't want to figure them out without you." I closed my eyes, heart pounding like it hadn't in months. Not out of fear, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt something good, something honest. "You won't have to." That night, we didn't label anything. We didn't talk about what it meant or where it would go. We just stayed close, on the floor of my room, holding hands, his head on my shoulder as the rain finally started to fall outside. He stayed until after dark. And when he left, he squeezed my hand once before slipping out the door with a quiet smile that made something inside me unclench. It didn't fix everything, The world outside still hadn't changed. But he had chosen me not in a big, loud, rebellious kind of way. Just in the way he showed up, stayed close, and let the space between us shrink until there was no longer a question of where he stood. Everyone else had kept their distance, except him, and that made all the difference. After that night, something between us shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. We didn't suddenly become a couple in the way people think of it. There were no labels, no announcements, no Instagram stories with cute captions. It was quieter than that, but it was real, tangible. A string tied between us, invisible to the rest of the world, but unbreakable. He still sat with me at lunch, still picked me first for group projects. But now there were little things layered into the ordinary. A hand brushing mine under the table, a smile that lingered a bit too long, the way he'd wait for me after class even when we weren't heading the same direction. No one said anything outright, but I could feel the shift in how people looked at us, like they were starting to piece things together. And still, he stayed. There were moments I thought he might pull away, like the afternoon we were walking down the hall and someone muttered faggots under their breath just loud enough for us to hear. I flinched, but Jake didn't. He stopped walking, turned to the guy, and said, "Clear as anything. You got something you want to say to my face?" The guy looked away, didn't say another word. Jake didn't touch me or make a show of anything. But later, when we were alone, he turned to me and said, "You shouldn't have to fight this alone." I think I loved him in that moment. Or maybe I already had, and that moment just showed me it was safe to admit it. Still, we were careful. He wasn't out, not even to his closest friends. And I didn't want to push him. I knew what it was like to feel the weight of other people's expectations pressing into your chest until you couldn't breathe. We had this ritual, almost silly in its routine, where every Friday after school he'd come over to my place. We'd pretend to work on homework or play video games, but more often than not we'd just end up talking. About life. About how weird and terrifying the future felt. About what we were afraid of and what we hoped for. About us, though never too directly. Sometimes he'd fall asleep next to me on the bed, his head on my chest, one hand curled in the fabric of my shirt like he didn't want to drift too far. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find his fingers still tangled in mine. And sometimes I wondered how long it could last. Because the truth was, we were still just kids. And the world didn't make it easy for kids like us to hold on to something this delicate, this real. I remember one night, after a particularly bad day, I asked him if he ever regretted it, being close to me, whatever we were. He looked at me like I just slapped him. "Do you?" "No," I said quickly. "God, no." "Then don't ask me that again," he said. "Because you're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. And if I have to keep it a secret for a while longer, that's fine. But don't ever think I regret it." That night, he kissed me like it was a promise. And I believed him. But life has a way of forcing things out into the open, no matter how carefully you try to protect them. It was mid-spring when it happened, a Friday again. He was over, as usual, and we were in my room with the door cracked open. My mom had just gotten home, earlier than usual. I didn't even realize she was back until she called up the stairs to say hi. Jake and I sprang apart instinctively, not because we were doing anything wrong, but because we were still used to hiding. Still, I think she saw something. Maybe it was the look on his face or the way I moved just a little too fast. Maybe she'd seen it coming for a while and just hadn't said anything. Later that night, she came into my room and sat on the edge of the bed. "I like Jake," she said. "He seems like a good kid." I nodded slowly. She looked at me, soft but direct. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" My throat closed. I could lie. Or I could finally let go of the fear that had gripped me for so long. "He's more than a friend," I said. My voice shook. She didn't say anything for a moment, just reached out and put her hand over mine. "Okay," she said. "Thanks for telling me." That was it. She didn't pry, didn't press. She just let me be. And for the first time, I felt the difference between tolerance and support. She saw me, and she didn't turn away. I told Jake the next day, and his reaction was this mix of awe and relief and panic. "You're brave," he said. "I'm tired of being afraid." He nodded. Then, quieter, "I don't know if I'm ready for that yet." "I know," I told him. I'm not asking you to be. We sat like that for a long time, in the quiet, in the safety of a room that had seen our hearts slowly uncoil. And even though nothing had changed out in the world, everything inside that room had. Because I'd stopped hiding. And he was still right there with me. That spring was the beginning of everything and, in some ways, the beginning of the end. Not in a dramatic, break-the-glass kind of way, but in the slow, creeping realization that time doesn't pause just because something feels perfect. That the world doesn't care how hard you fought to find a little softness inside it. That graduation was coming, and with it, the inevitable unraveling of everything we'd built in secret. Jake and I never talked much about the future. It was like if we said the words out loud, college, distance, goodbyes, they'd become real and we'd have to reckon with them. So we filled our time with now. With long walks through our neighborhood, staying out just past sunset. With hands brushing in the dark, and looks across the room that said more than words ever could. And sometimes, on the really good days, we allowed ourselves to hope. Like the night we snuck out after midnight and climbed up to the roof of the old gym. The town stretched out around us, quiet and still. He laid beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his shoulder against mine. Ever think about just leaving? He asked. All the time. Where would you go? I paused. Somewhere no one knows us. Somewhere we don't have to pretend. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, I think I'd go with you. And that made my chest hurt in the best way possible. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't even hold hands. But it felt more intimate than anything else we'd ever done. Because hope, real hope, is terrifying. And beautiful. And rare. We made it through the end of the school year like that. Suspended in our own little orbit. I came out to a few more people, slowly. A friend here. A teacher there. Most people didn't say much. Some drifted away. Some surprised me. But Jake stayed quiet. I never pushed him. I never said, when are you going to tell someone? Because I knew how much courage it took to even admit it to yourself. And if being with me gave him room to breathe without labels or announcements, then that was enough. Until prom. God, prom. I wasn't planning to go. Too many eyes. Too many memories of what it felt like to be the center of whispers. But Jake asked me in the only way Jake could.
No flowers.
No signs. Just one afternoon, sitting in the back of a mostly empty classroom, when he turned to me and said, if I asked you to go to prom with me, like not as a joke, not as a cover, but actually with me, would you say yes? I stared at him. You serious? He nodded. Yeah, I think I am. You're not out. Not yet. And people will talk. They already do. I didn't answer right away. I didn't have to. I just reached over, took his hand, and squeezed it once. Okay, I said. Let's go. He didn't wear a tux. Just a dark button-up shirt and slacks. I wore something similar. We didn't arrive together. That was still too much. But we found each other once we were inside. And when they dimmed the lights and started playing the slow songs, he didn't move. I stood beside him, watching other couples sway under the lights. And just when I thought maybe he'd changed his mind, he turned to me and held out a hand. Dance with me? He asked. I hesitated. Just for a second. Then I took his hand. The room didn't go silent. The music didn't stop. But I felt the shift, the ripple that moved through everyone watching us. A few people turned away. A few whispered. One guy laughed, short, sharp, mean. But most just, let us be. We swayed together under the lights, his hand warm on the small of my back, our fingers laced between us. And for the first time in forever, I didn't care who was watching. Because this was ours. When the song ended, he leaned in close and said, I think I want to tell people. For real. Are you sure? He nodded. I'm tired of pretending. So that night, when he posted the photo of us dancing, no caption, just our silhouettes under the string lights, he didn't hide it from anyone. And yeah, there was fallout. His friends asked questions. Some got weird. Some backed off. But others surprised him. A few even reached out to me to say they were sorry for how they treated me. That they just didn't understand before. That they were proud of him. That last month before graduation, We walked through the halls of our school not as secrets, but as something like a couple. We didn't shout it from the rooftops, but we didn't shrink either. And that, I think, was what I'll remember most. Not the heartbreak that came later. Not the way college took us to different states. Not the slow, aching fade that time and distance made impossible to fight. But this, the way he reached for my hand in the dark. The way he stood by me when no one else would. The way he saw me, truly saw me when I felt invisible to the world. Everyone kept their distance after they found out. Except him. And for a little while he was everything. We kept in touch after graduation. At first it was constant, late-night calls, text messages that stretched until morning, blurry selfies from our dorm rooms with captions like "Wish you were here" and "This feels weird without you." He'd send voice notes on walks across his campus. I'd reply with stories about my roommate's terrible cooking or the guy in my lecture hall who always wore a cape. We said, "I miss you" often. Maybe too often. Maybe just enough. But slowly, inevitably, the space between those messages began to grow. It wasn't anyone's fault. Just life. New classes, new schedules, new people. We were both trying to build something for ourselves, in places where the other didn't exist. And while we never stopped caring, it started to feel like we were living in different movies. Ones that only occasionally overlapped, like flickers of a shared memory. The last time I saw him in person was during winter break of our freshman year. He came over one night like old times. We stayed up late watching movies, sprawled out on the couch, a blanket half thrown over us. It was quiet, comfortable, but also different, like we were both trying to remember how to fit into the shape of each other again. At one point, he turned to me and asked, "Do you ever wish we'd done things differently?" I knew what he meant. If we had met later, maybe, when things didn't feel so fragile, when we weren't both still figuring ourselves out. But I shook my head. "No. You saved me, Jake. Back then, you were the only one who stayed." He looked down, picking at the fringe of the blanket. "I miss you," he said. "I miss you, too." And then, soft, tentative, he kissed me. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't fiery. It was slow, nostalgic, like he was saying goodbye even if neither of us said the words out loud. He stayed that night, curled up beside me in the dark like we were 17 again, like the world hadn't pulled us in opposite directions. But when the sun came up and it was time for him to go, I think we both knew. We didn't fight. We didn't break up. We didn't even say it. We just let it go gently, the way you set a bird free even when it still wants to sit in your hands a little longer. After that, we spoke less. A message here or there. A happy birthday text. A photo from a concert he knew I'd love. Eventually, the messages stopped altogether. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if we tried harder. If one of us had said, "Don't go." If we'd made promises instead of quiet goodbyes. But then I remember who we were when we found each other. Two boys lost in a world that didn't know how to hold us gently. Two hearts learning how to hope again. Two souls who, for a moment, met at the exact right time to remind each other that we weren't alone. He was the first person to reach across the silence. The first person to look at me and not turn away. And maybe we weren't meant to last forever, but we were meant to happen. Because sometimes the people who come into your life for a short time leave the deepest marks. Not scars, not always, but something else. Something tender. Something like light. Every now and then, I still dream about him. Not as he was. Not a boy in a high school hallway. Not the smile I memorized like a prayer. But as he might be now. A little older. A little more certain. Still with those same eyes that saw me when no one else did. And in the dream, he's still reaching for my hand. Only this time, I don't have to hide when I take it. So yeah, everyone kept their distance after they found out. Everyone except him. And because of him, I learned how to stop hiding. I learned how to stay soft, even when the world tried to harden me. And maybe, just maybe, that was love.